I'm Mick Danzig.
And I'm Hannah Hampton, and you're listening to HR After Hours.
Well, hello and welcome to HR After Hours podcast, the only HR podcast to be repeatedly invited to a Mambla event. Hannah, my sister from another mister, the yin to my yang, the Nancy to my Sid. How the hell are you today?
I'm great. I'm excited to be back. I feel like it's been a while since we've recorded. Excited to be back. How about you?
Absolutely. It's funny is we've had a couple sporadic recordings over the last couple months, but we've both been extremely busy to the point where we are fending off rumors that we had some sort of terrible falling out. Even your husband suspected.
Your husband. He thought I was being replaced by the bubbler. He thought I got fired.
Absolutely not. No, it's actually quite the opposite. Not only we both had a lot going on in our professional and personal lives, but Hannah and I actually hung out recently.
Yay!
She traveled out to El Casa de Mick, hung out with the family so she and I could attend, believe it or not, a Rob Zombie and Alice Cooper concert.
Great. And it was so much fun. It was an amazing weekend, and we are blessed by the concert gods. You know, I feel like we did something in this life to earn it, or maybe in a past life to earn that great concert karma. Mick is just a wonderful host. It was a great time, and I'm so glad we got to do it.
By wonderful host, I laid out some Tang and some week-old donuts and said, yeah, you're good. But no, it was...
like every drink I could possibly want, and then some amazing blueberry cheese and crackers and everything my little heart could desire. So I was well nourished and well hydrated. It was
well, you were a fantastic guest. We renewed for a new season, so to speak.
Yay!
And so you'll be getting a lot more Mick and Hannah. There were just some things that we had to add to our agreements, and one of it was that I stopped walking around with my robe open all the time, apparently. So I told her that I'd work on that, and we're going to jump right in.
Agreement. Yes, we'll jump right in. We came to an agreement.
Hannah, I'm real excited. We've got a lot of great topics coming up, and of course, we've got our Halloween specials that we like to do. This article that you brought to my attention kind of got us a little, I don't even want to say riled up. It feels like no one listened to us for the last year. So I'm going to let you take the lead and tell our listeners about what's going on here.
Everyone in the HR world was talking about this, but there was a KPMG study that said most CEOs expect a full return to office in 3 years. So I'm going to be quoting this article from HR Dive by Maura Weber Sadovi. I hope I'm saying her name right. 83% of CEOs surveyed globally, predicted that companies will shift to require a full return of employees in office work in the next 3 years. And this is an increase from 64% in the prior year. So that is a big jump. And they surveyed 1,300 chief executives. So the report also revealed a generational divide in the sentiment. So 87% of CEOs aged 60 to 69 predicted a full return to office. 83% 50 to 59, and then 75% of chief executives 40 to 49 did, according to the report. So, and the other interesting tidbit is more male CEOs, so 84%, bet that there'll be a full return to office compared to 78% of top female executives. It's basically what KPMG said, and this is a quote. This year's findings reveal that CEOs are hardening their stance on returning to pre-pandemic ways of working. I feel like, obviously, I don't want to say it's big news, but of course people were talking about it because this is on the heels of Amazon CEO telling workers they have to return to the office 5 days a week starting in January. So they're bringing people back to the office. It's one of those things where big companies are doing it. Are other companies going to follow, or are they going to adapt to the new way of working? So I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. So before we get into, more minutia of that, Mick, what are your thoughts?
You and I have some conspiracy theories or popular conspiracy
Mhm.
theories. As we were going through some of the conspiracy theories, I didn't notice that Amazon and Elon Musk are both
Mhm.
highlighted in the same paragraph. And of course, we've talked about Elon, especially when he took over X and the things he's done in the past with Tesla, where he sometimes worked days straight. And it's not uncommon to receive a company wide 3 a.m. email from Mr. Musk. But what I didn't notice when we first started talking about this article, the two companies that have these amazing programs that are benefiting from the government.
Mhm.
Amazon's not only been called out on the fact that they're allowed to use the post office often for free of charge or minimal cost. And then, of course, Elon having huge government contracts for space travel. Those are the two companies trying to kind of lead the charge, getting back to work because that's what we do here. So that's
Mhm.
really interesting. And I had to speak up on that because it just slapped me in the face. I think this is a bad call. I do think that there's a lot of media being thrown out there trying to encourage us to get away from the hybrid work model. It does impact certain segments of our economy, and that's where some of these conspiracy theories are going to go.
Mhm.
So let's jump right in because you gave me some great intel earlier this
Yeah,
morning.
there's a couple of different conspiracy theories that are floating around there. And one of my favorite ones, I'm not going to say I 100% believe it, but I do believe in some certain cases it could be true. And that's a lot of bigger companies are calling people back into the office as a way to cut down headcount because obviously layoffs look bad. But if you're forcing people back to the office, there's going to be natural attrition. And that is a way to cut your head count without it being your fault, being a layoff. So you're like, well, it's the employee's decision, but that is a conspiracy theory. And to me, I feel like that could really be true.
When you mentioned that, I was just like, oh, well, yes. And almost every HR manager has a time, especially the longer they've been doing it, where they know that a team member that they want to lay off is going to hang themselves very quickly. But when you know that, hey, if I just wait 5 more days, I don't have to fire this person because they're going to take care of it themselves. Even if we haven't had that thought, we've had that person that messed up before we got the opportunity to put our documentation in place and state our case because we were going to call them in on Friday and they did something to get themselves fired or quit on Wednesday. No one's ever been like, oh, darn it, I really wanted to sit down and lay this all out. We're all like, oh, yeah,
Exactly.
I put all that work in, but they took care of the problem themselves. Whew, that's one less thing I had to do today. I mean, then if you go into the levels of everything, so many businesses that are publicly traded and being driven by the performance of their stock, this is like a double win for them. They don't have to announce Amazon lays off 5% of its workforce because 5% of its workforce decided not to come into the office 5 days a week. So, wow, that's almost sheer genius. I'm so impressed. I haven't had the opportunity to be as angry about it as I want to be. So,
Yep.
that I think is a very valid conspiracy theory as far as probability.
So another conspiracy theory, of course, commercial real estate, somewhat the big loser of the remote work because companies require less office space. So they're trying to drive people back into the commercial real estate offices so that, they're making more money and able to charge higher rents. And, we all have seen the struggle, especially you think about the large cities who have the big business districts struggling for tenant. They're trying to get people back to the office so that they can rent out their spaces. And a lot of people believe that the articles that come into these big newspapers are sponsored or lobbied by the big commercial real estate companies who are the losers here. So again, thinking about likelihood, this is not like, oh, aliens are going to come down and fix everything type of a conspiracy theory. This is something that I feel like, yeah, it is pretty likely. And I'm sure real estate companies are out there trying hard to figure out marketing and ways to get people back into their office spaces. So it's not a surprise to me whatsoever.
I think there is some truth and possibly in even different ways than being in cahoots with real commercial real estate. I would look at the companies that force their people to come back 5 days a week and see if those companies, part of their portfolio are real estate investments.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something that I was recently informed of that I thought was odd. But if you notice since the pandemic, even during the pandemic, there was not a decrease in commercial complexes being built. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily retail outlets, but things like what look like they could be warehouse buildings or fulfillment centers or these big giant structures that could house several different things, but they all typically look like they're going to be warehouses or they have loading platforms, things like that. What a lot of people are not aware of is the government relief during the pandemic. Some of these government relief programs gave funds for continuing commercial real estate
Mm-hmm.
acquisition and expansions. I don't know about you, but I actually have two such structures within 15 miles of my house. They've been sitting empty. And I'm like, how in the world can they do this? It's because
Mm-hmm.
these government loans, a lot of these people are not paying rent or they're paying bare minimum rent on these
Mm-hmm.
new buildings. They're going to have to start paying real rent in the next couple of years, which means now those buildings need to be used. So there is a push to get businesses to get in those buildings because they've been sitting empty as long as they have because they haven't really worried about it because they're paying like $1 a month for some of these giant buildings you're seeing. The government wants to get paid back, and that's going to happen soon. When you talk about cities like downtown Chicago and downtown New York, where a lot of businesses depended on those office buildings being full, whether they were the coffee houses, the restaurants, the drugstores, things like that, there are still areas that they need something to happen.
Right.
Is this the answer? Well, for them it is, but for, the future of industry, I don't believe so. There's some validity there when it comes to commercial real estate needing some attention and being an intricate part of not only our economy, but a lot of businesses' portfolios.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I totally agree. And all that additional information you shared, it just feel like it puts a lot of the pieces together. I've got one more conspiracy theory, and I don't want to say it's definitely a little bit more far-fetched than the other two. It's all about control and controlling the workers. And it's easier to control people when they're in the office than working from home. Because when you work from home, you've got the freedom to, kind of take breaks the way you want to throw in a load of laundry to help, not have a commute. So you've got more free time to pursue passions or maybe start your own business. And our economy is dependent on a couple of things, and it's having workers to work for these companies and then also having you consume. And a lot of times, if you are, this is going to sound terrible, but like depressed and you're kind of stuck in your dead end job, you spend money on things to make you feel better and you fall to marketing schemes and all of that stuff. But they need their workers to go into the office and comply and just be good workers to keep our economy going. And rather than truly care about people and people's well-beings, like we are all pawns in this capitalistic world where it's like we need workers to keep churning out whatever it is to keep our economy going. So we're just pawns in this big game of chess.
3 years ago, I would have made fun of you and called you a communist. Well, actually more like 5 years ago. The funny thing is, this is episode 1 of
Oh,
season 6. You've definitely made me look at things differently, and I think we are a good example of when
and I'm not saying
people
I believe
find
that one, but it's just one
no,
that I've
no.
read.
I think that you and I are a great example of what happens when people with different philosophies or school of thought up to that point meet and actually listen to one another and find middle grounds. I absolutely love how much you've talked about us being in a capitalistic consumption economy. Capitalism works as far as, yes, it's got our country this far. We're not going to go into a big rhetoric about any of that. Thing is, Generation X, we're the ones that are kind of stuck in the middle. We lived in the 80s, consumption was good. We saw the
Mhm.
good, the bad, and the ugly of it. But at the end of the day, we're the ones on social media bragging about how great the 80s and early 90s were, right?
Right.
So we had a good time. And that was a period, with Reaganomics that we were raised to be consumers and had
Mhm.
status symbols and drive a certain type of German car and wear Rolexes. And these are all things I'm guilty of. Now, I know a bit about the Hampton household, and they are too. But our generation's having more of a battle than, your millennials and the younger generations, because they were able to identify it early on that we don't want this. And what did
Mhm.
the pandemic do for a lot of us? And was very positive, I believe. Again, when it comes to being in a consumption-based economy, not the greatest thing for the economy. A lot of us learned during the pandemic what we really needed to
Mhm.
survive, what we
Right.
had to have. And as we did that, then we started to prioritize the things that we still wanted, the status pieces. But then it became, well, we don't need all the Gucci bags. I just need a
Right.
couple good pieces of Gucci, some matching stuff as fillers. I don't need to have all the different Rolexes, but I should have at least one signature piece that I really am proud of. And again, your husband and I share that affinity for watches. But
Mhm.
we also started learning, well, if I don't go and buy this, I don't have to work as much, so I can go do these fun things, these
Right.
outings. I can hike
And
with
we
my
missed
family.
traveling, right? During the pandemic, a lot of people halted their travel. So, and they realized like, hey, getting out, seeing the world, being in nature is so important to your health and well-being. And we prioritize that. And so, and hey, let's get real. Going for a hike in the woods or just being in nature now, you're not spending money. You're not, of course, you're fueling the economy in certain ways by, buying hiking gear or whatever it might be, but you're not just sitting at home, consume, consume, consume. Like you're out there enjoying the world. And it's funny, there's a lot of some recent memes I've seen where they show these beautiful landscapes of nature and it says, this is our world. And can you believe somebody invented Excel? Like we live on a beautiful planet with all of these great places in nature. And, here we are sitting behind screens, and living our lives at a desk. And I think people are really realizing now more than ever, especially because company loyalty is not there anymore. You can get fired or laid off in an instant. People are not sticking around at jobs for 30 plus years. So it's like there's a lot of people are living their lives for things that are important to them and things that fulfill them versus just being that good worker bee. And I do believe, I hate to say it, but that boomer generation, many of them are retired. They had the pensions. They got, they have the retirement package and they worked towards those, but they took all of that away. And so, we are all relying on ourselves with the 401ks and this and that to create our future. And people realize it's not sitting at a desk for 8 to 10 hours a day staring at a screen. Like, let's enjoy life now versus waiting for that pension and enjoying it when we're old.
We have learned to work to live versus living to work. And it's a
Yep.
challenge, just like living in the moment's a challenge. And part of the expansion of that is we're no longer, like you said, I'm a worker bee. I get 2 or 3 weeks vacation. I get to do something cool then. And if you really think about it, even some forms of family vacations were based on, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. And now it's finding these destinations and fun ways to get there. And we want to experience these with our family, where before it was almost even like, well, I'm supposed to go to Hawaii about now. So, oh, and I'll take my family. Oh, that's going to be fun. But now
Mhm.
it's, I want to go here, take my family so they can experience it with me so we can create memories. Now
Yeah.
that we're learning, perfect example. I flew so much more than, and most of my vacations were about getting on and off planes. And let's admit it, air travel sucks right now. It's just not pleasant for the most part. But because I've changed my whole mindset, and it's about the adventure and sometimes journey versus the destination, everything. I've
Mhm.
completely changed the way I vacation. I traded in my German sports car for an SUV, and I take my dog and my family on these trips. And part of the fun is the stops along the way versus this very regimented, airline driven rental car. So I'm not getting rental cars. I'm not contributing to the airline industry. I'm not going to hotels. I'm getting verbos. I mean, that's part of the economy that's growing. But I have changed my consumption habits. And I'm still consuming, but it's controlled. It's much more strategic, where, let's be honest, we were consuming everything. And that's what made Amazon so popular. But we were even consuming the things we enjoyed. I got to read this book. Oh, yeah, I got to get this playlist put together. I don't want any songs over 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't want to watch a movie that's more than 2 hours long. All these decisions were task driven
Yeah.
versus enjoyment. And we're finally learning how to enjoy things. And part of enjoying life is not being a taskmaster drone working for the man. Pardon my hippie rhetoric.
That is so true. That is true. And that's again, that's I feel like where we are today as a society. I honestly kind of back to our original discussion about bringing people back to the office. We are changing as humans. The work world has changed due to technology. You've got to adapt to that. And while CEOs want to bring people back to the office, I can't see workers being okay with that or going along with it. So who knows what's going to happen? I said we'll just have to kind of see the next 3 years, but I certainly feel like people want that flexible work environment. People have gotten used to the perks of it. And I think people are going to fight for it. They don't want to let it go. And I certainly can understand that. I mean, you and I both, we work from our homes, so we understand kind of the pros and cons to it. Like, is it perfect? No, but is it great to have that flexibility, that work-life balance that everybody really strives for? And I would say everybody, but most people strive for a really great work-life balance so that, yeah, not living to work, but you're working to live, to have the life that you want. And I don't think it's bad, but again, we'll see what happens. I think it's really interesting that CEOs are going to push it, but ultimately that's one person, a very powerful person, but one person in a company.
Think people would definitely rebel, and I think more people would just join the unemployed than go back 5 days a week. It's always been a struggle when it comes to childcare. This hybrid work model has taken off so much pressure from people, and I think it would be a huge mistake. But I do think you're going to see people drive this. And if you're in an industry or run a company that really does require it, that's fine. You probably don't have a
Cool.
hybrid work model currently. As far as the people that Elon Musk is seeking, they're out there. I mean, you mentioned that earlier. There are people that like working 70 hours a week. So you've got to realize, as a potential employer, if that's what you're seeking out, it's a very specific driven ask that you have there for an associate. So it's going to be slim pickings. And there are people that have sought out the businesses that utilize those people. And so they'll have that very specific target team member. I'm not that person, especially as I'm getting a little older. So I'm not going to be that guy ever. And working in an office 5 days a week, I did very little throughout my career. But when I did it, that's when I was the least happy. I think it did impact my work performance negatively, or at least it felt like it did to me. And if you have to have a worker bee mentality, remember, those happy bees are the good worker bees. So you still got to find some compromise. We got to have some fun here, but I find this truly sad and terrifying at the same time.
Well, I think this was a fun conversation. I appreciate it. And, I feel like there's so much more that feeds into this topic. And certainly I look forward to talking about it deeper in further podcast episodes.
I agree. This is not the last you've heard of this topic. This is something that we're both pretty passionate about. At the end of the day, we're just trying to put the human back in human resources. And Hanna Hampton, no one does that better than you. Have a successful day.
Talk to you soon.